The wind tasted of salt and diesel. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves adjusted her scope, feeling the weight of dismissive glances heavier than her gear. 12 operators stood behind her at the forward operating base in Helmand. Men with calloused hands and calloused minds. Ladies don't belong in sniper units, sweetheart. Just keep the numbers straight and don't mess up the wind calls. Staff Sergeant Miller's words cut through the pre-mission briefing. His laughter, joined by others, hung in the dry Afghan air. Sarah's fingers tightened around her data book, the small notebook where she meticulously recorded every environmental variable. A spotter. Just a spotter. The invisible half of a sniper team. Her partner, Master Sergeant Daniels, the actual shooter, didn't join the laughter. But he didn't stop it either. You'll stay in position and feed me data. Nothing more. Clear? Sarah nodded, a single steel pendant swinging from her neck, her father's dog tag, the one he never came home with. 8 hours later, when the bullet found its mark at 1,142 yards through a sandstorm that should have made the shot impossible, nobody laughed. Nobody even breathed. And Sarah wasn't spotting anymore. Have you ever been dismissed as just anything? Dawn broke over the barren mountains as Delta Team prepared for insertion. Operation Kingfisher, a high-priority target extraction. Intelligence placed a high-value Taliban commander in a compound at the edge of a valley infamous for its unpredictable wind patterns. A perfect shot would need to travel 1.5 miles across that valley. Most of the team believed it couldn't be done. Daniels, you sure your little helper can handle real combat conditions? Staff Sergeant Miller adjusted his kit, eyes flicking to Sarah's slender frame. This isn't the shooting range at Quantico. Sarah had graduated top of her class in advanced marksmanship. She'd outshot half the men here during qualifications. But her place was behind the scope that spots, not the scope that kills. The military had its unwritten rules. Lieutenant Reeves knows her job, Daniels replied flatly, checking his custom M2010 rifle. His words offered protection, but not defense. The team moved under cover of darkness, traversing razor-sharp ridges to reach the observation post. Sarah's muscles burned under the weight of her pack and equipment. 68 pounds, the same as everyone else's. No concessions for being the only woman on the team. She caught snippets of whispered conversation as they climbed. Waste of a spot on the team. Diversity hire. When it gets real, she'll freeze. Sarah focused on her breathing. Steady, controlled. The same rhythm she'd used to call Daniel's shots. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The bullet doesn't care who pulls the trigger, Sadie. It only cares about physics. They reached the observation point at 0400 hours. While Daniel set up his firing position, Sarah unpacked her spotting scope, rangefinder, and Kestrel weather meter. Her movements were precise, practiced to perfection through thousands of repetitions. The data would be flawless. It always was. But data alone doesn't kill. The finger on the trigger does. Target building is at 2,640 yards, she murmured to Daniels as dawn crept over the horizon. Wind is swirling, valley effect. I'm reading 3 different directions between us and target. Miller snorted behind them. If she's right about that, I'll eat my boots. Sarah didn't turn. Her eyes remained fixed through her spotting scope, calculating, measuring, a precision instrument dismissed as an accessory. Would you stand firm when everyone expects you to break? The sun climbed higher, baking the rocks around them. 6 hours into their hide, and the target had yet to emerge. Sarah's eyes burned from the constant strain of watching through the scope, cataloging every movement in and around the compound. Her notes filled page after page of her waterproof data book. Contact, she whispered suddenly. 3 vehicles approaching from the south. Matches the description. The team tensed. Daniels settled deeper behind his rifle. Range to new position, 1,742 yards. Wind at our position, 3 miles per hour, 9 o'clock. Mid-valley showing mirage, indicating 7 miles per hour, 10 o'clock. Target area has dust devils, estimate 12 miles per hour, variable. Miller shook his head. That's impossible to call. No one can read that many wind values simultaneously. But Daniels trusted her. They'd worked together for 14 months. Sarah had never given him bad data. I'll trust my spotter, he said simply, making minute adjustments to his scope. A flash of metal caught Sarah's eye, something on the target's chest as he emerged from the third vehicle. Recognition slammed into her. "That's not our target," she breathed. "The intelligence was wrong. That's Aziz Rahman, Taliban bomb maker, higher priority." The team leader crowded forward, squinting through binoculars. "How the hell can you tell from this distance?" Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to the steel pendant at her neck, the scar pattern on his right cheek. "I memorized all high-value target dossiers before deployment." What she didn't say, that Rahman had designed the IED that took her father's legs 3 years ago. Later, internal bleeding took the rest of him. Daniels didn't know. Nobody knew. The wind picked up suddenly, sending dust spiraling across the valley. A sandstorm was brewing, the kind that could ground helicopters and strand them for days. "Shot window is closing," Daniels murmured. "These wind conditions are at the edge of possible." Sarah felt the weight of her sidearm against her ribs, the steel pendant against her chest, the eyes of men who expected her to be less. "Then we better not miss," she said. The first raindrops of the coming storm hit the rocks around them, dark splotches on sun-bleached stone, like blood on sand. What would you sacrifice to prove your worth? The sandstorm arrived with shocking violence. Visibility dropped to meters, then feet. The radio crackled with the news they dreaded. Extraction delayed by at least 6 hours. The mission window was collapsing. "We're going to lose him," the team leader growled, sand pattering against his boonie hat. "Daniels, take the shot if you have any sight picture at all." Daniels remained frozen behind his rifle, eyes squeezed against the stinging particles. "I can't see the target building, much less a human figure." Sarah's mind raced through calculations. The storm created a fluid, 3-dimensional problem of ballistics. She pulled out her data book, flipping to formulas she'd created herself, algorithms for extreme weather shooting that her instructors had dismissed as theoretical. "I can guide it," she said, voice steady against the howling wind. Miller laughed, a harsh bark. "Guide what? A miracle?" Sarah ignored him, turning to Daniels. "I've been tracking the storm's movement patterns. There's a rhythm to it. The sand will thin for approximately 8.2 seconds every 47 seconds. The team leader frowned. "That's not possible to predict." "I've been counting it for the last 20 minutes, she replied, showing the precise timestamps in her notes. "The next window opens in approximately 12 seconds. The one after that is our only shot before Rahman moves inside." Daniels looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "You're certain?" Sarah nodded once. The storm's howl lowered in pitch, exactly as she'd predicted. "Now," she said as the sand thinned momentarily. "Elevation adjustment plus 11.2 MOA from your zero. Windage left 6.8 MOA. The values were so extreme, they seemed absurd. Yet Daniels made the adjustments without question. The window closed. Sand whipped around them again. The team collectively held their breath. "Next opening in 39 seconds, Sarah said, her voice dropping into the calm, almost trance-like state of absolute focus. "I need you to fire precisely 2 seconds after I say, mark." Nobody laughed now. They watched her count down silently, her lips barely moving. "Window opening," she murmured. 3, 2, 1, mark. Daniels waited those precise 2 seconds, then squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, its sound swallowed by the storm. Some wounds run so deep, they become your strength. Through the spotting scope, Sarah tracked the vapor trail of the bullet as it disappeared into the swirling sand. Physics and faith, traveling at 2,610 feet per second. "Impact," she announced calmly. "Center mass." Miller scoffed. "There's no way you can see." The radio interrupted him. The observation team on the other ridge confirmed. "Target down. Clean shot." Rahman's security detail was scrambling in confusion, unable to determine where the shot had come from through the storm. Daniels pulled back from his rifle, blinking sand from his eyes. That's not possible." Sarah remained silent, calculating and recalculating the variables that had guided that impossible shot. The wind values, the density altitude, the Coriolis effect, the microclimates within the valley. Her mind had transformed into a ballistic computer more precise than any technology. "Lucky guess," Miller muttered, but the conviction had drained from his voice. The team leader stared at her, reassessing everything he thought he knew. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. Sarah kept her eyes on the compound, tracking secondary targets through the spotting scope. Focus on extraction. Storms getting worse. But the dynamic had already shifted. The men exchanged glances, not of ridicule, but of uneasy respect, the kind reserved for things not fully understood. Daniels broke the silence. "I've never seen wind calls like that. Never. How did you calculate?" The sudden crack of a bullet impacting rock inches from their position cut him off. A spray of stone fragments caught Daniels across the face. He fell back, blood streaming from dozens of tiny wounds. "Sniper! Take cover!" the team leader shouted. Sarah dragged Daniels behind the rocky outcropping as more rounds impacted around them. The team medic scrambled forward, already pulling gauze from his kit. "Multiple fragments in both eyes," the medic reported grimly. "He can't see." The radio squawked. "Delta team, be advised. Saturn shows at least a dozen tangos converging on your position from the south ridge. Extraction is still 5 hours out minimum." Sarah looked at Daniel's rifle, then at the blood-soaked gauze covering his eyes. They had been spotted, outmanned. Their shooter was down, and the storm was about to get much worse. "What awakens in you when everyone else falters?" "We need to eliminate that enemy sniper or we're all dead," the team leader shouted over the storm's roar. "Anyone get a bearing on the shot?" The men looked at each other. In the chaos and limited visibility, nobody had triangulated the incoming fire. "South-southeast, approximately 960 yards, elevated position," Sarah said without hesitation. The bullet fragmentation pattern and impact angle on the rock face narrow it down to the ridgeline with the split boulder. The team leader squinted through the swirling sand, unable to see even 100 yards clearly. "You can't possibly—" "I heard the bullet," she cut in. "Subsonic by the time it reached us. Accounting for air density and temperature, that puts the shooter just under 1,000 yards out." Miller spat sand. "Great. So what do we do about it?" Sarah was already moving to Daniel's rifle, checking the chamber and remaining ammunition. 3 rounds left. "Lieutenant," the team leader warned, "that's not your position." "With respect, sir, Sergeant Daniels is incapacitated, and I'm the only other qualified precision marksman." Her hands moved over the rifle with practiced familiarity, adjusting the scope to her eye relief. "We have an enemy shooter with our range and bearing. We have incoming hostiles, and we have a sandstorm that will ground any QRF for hours." She lifted the rifle, testing its weight and balance. Different from her competition rifle, heavier in the stock. "The storm works both ways," she continued, voice detached and analytical. "They can't see us clearly either, but I can use the wind patterns I've been tracking to calculate their position more accurately than they can calculate ours." The team medic looked up from where he was treating Daniels. "Sir, we don't have many options." The team leader hesitated, then nodded sharply. "You get 1 attempt, Lieutenant. Make it count." Sarah positioned herself behind the rifle, adopting a prone firing stance that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. Her breathing changed, slowing to the precise rhythm that separated the amateur from the master. "I need a distraction," she said. "Flash bang at my mark, thrown 30 yards north of our position. It'll draw his attention away from where I'll actually fire from." Miller readied the flashbang, newfound respect evident in his movements. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the storm's rhythm, tasting its patterns. The steel pendant pressed against her collarbone, her father's voice in her mind. Patience is the sniper's true weapon. She waited for the perfect moment in the storm's breath. In the heart of chaos, will you find your stillness? Sarah's finger hovered near the trigger guard, not yet ready. The storm's fury had reached its peak, sand and rock fragments pelting their position without mercy. Her mind drifted momentarily to another storm, another time. Quantico, the sniper training course. 22 candidates, 21 men, and her. "Women don't have the temperament for precision shooting under pressure," the chief instructor had said, not bothering to lower his voice. Too emotional, too unstable. Week 6 of the course, the long-range qualification. 1,000-yard shot in driving rain and gusting winds, 21 misses, 1 perfect hit. Sarah, drenched to the bone, rifle steady despite her shivering limbs, the instructor's disbelief. Luck, he'd called it. Pure luck. So she'd done it again and again. 3 shots, 3 hits, impossible consistency. The next day, they'd moved her to spotter training instead. Your mathematical abilities are better utilized in support roles, they explained. The Corps needs to allocate resources efficiently. She'd accepted it, adapted, excelled as a spotter, buried the shooter inside her. Until now. Lieutenant? The team leader's voice pulled her back. We're running out of time. Sarah opened her eyes, calculations already flowing through her mind. The enemy sniper would have relocated after his shot. Standard procedure. But he couldn't have moved far in this storm. He's moved east along the ridgeline, she stated. Approximately 30 yards from his last position. How could you possibly know that? Miller demanded. Because that's what I would do, Sarah replied, her voice distant. Maintain elevation advantage, but change lateral position. Far enough to avoid counterfire, but close enough to keep visual contact through the storm. She settled deeper behind the rifle, becoming one with the weapon. Throw the distraction on my mark. The storm's howl seemed to fade as Sarah entered the shooter's mindset. Time slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. In her mind, her father lay in the hospital bed, phantom pain where his legs should be. Don't become me, Sadie, he'd whispered. This life takes more than it gives. She joined anyway, to honor him, to prove something. To whom? She wasn't sure anymore. Mark, she whispered. Miller threw the flashbang. The explosion tore through the storm 30 yards north of their position. In that precise moment, Sarah's world narrowed to her breath, her aim, and the invisible enemy hiding in the storm. Some choices define us forever. The flashbang created a momentary vacuum in the storm, drawing sand toward it, then repelling it in a visible shockwave. Sarah tracked the disturbance through her scope, watching for the telltale movement of a shooter adjusting position. There, a shadow shifting against shadow, a darker black within the storm's gray curtain. She inhaled slowly, calculating adjustments. The enemy had indeed moved east, but higher up the ridge than she'd anticipated. Approximately 1,040 yards now, in swirling winds that changed direction every few seconds. Through visibility that dropped to near zero between brief windows of clarity. An impossible shot. Sarah's mind translated environmental data into mathematical certainties. Wind at the muzzle, 15 mi, gusting to 22, from 10 o'clock. Mid-range wind, variable, averaging 19 militaries from 9 o'clock. Target area wind, 24 militaries from 8 o'clock. Temperature, 94 degree. Humidity, 12%. Barometric pressure falling rapidly with the storm. The bullet would need to fly a curved path, fighting crosswinds that would push it in 3 different directions along its trajectory. The margin for error was measured in fractions of an inch. Conditions have changed, she murmured, mostly to herself. Firing solution needs complete recalculation. She made precise adjustments to the scope, dialing in corrections that seemed excessive, even ludicrous. The team watched in tense silence. Even if you can see him, that shot's beyond human capability, the team leader said quietly. Sarah didn't respond. She was no longer in Afghanistan. She was in pure mathematics, in the realm where physics and instinct merge into something transcendent. The storm's rhythm had changed, becoming more erratic. The predictable windows were closing faster, opening less frequently. The pattern she'd tracked earlier was breaking down as the full force of the weather system engulfed the valley. Sarah recalculated, adjusted, recalculated again. Each variable interlocked with a dozen others in her mind. The bullet's ballistic coefficient, the spin drift, the transonic boundary where the round would pass from supersonic to subsonic flight. The barrel harmonics affected by temperature, a single shot, a single chance. She felt the storm's pulse weaken momentarily. A window approaching, briefer than before. Perhaps their last before visibility failed completely. Sarah exhaled half a breath and held the remainder, her body becoming utterly still. The world contracted to the narrow view through her scope, the darker shadow against the storm's gray canvas. In the space between heartbeats, destiny waits. The rifle cracked, its report torn away by the wind. Sarah tracked the vapor trail as it disappeared into the storm, following the bullet's path through sheer force of will. 1,040 yards away, the enemy sniper's position erupted in a brief flash, his weapon discharging as her bullet found its mark. "Target down," she announced, her voice hollow with the strange emptiness that follows perfect execution. No one spoke. The only sound was the howling wind and the soft ping of sand particles against their gear. "That's 2 impossible shots in 1 day," the team leader finally said, his voice thick with something between awe and uneasiness. "Who exactly are you, Lieutenant Reeves?" Sarah carefully cleared the rifle's chamber before answering. "Just a spotter, sir." But Miller was already pulling out his tablet, protected from the sand in a weatherproof case. Even in the middle of a firefight, connectivity remained. The military's reliance on data never ceased. "Sarah Elizabeth Reeves," he read aloud as the device connected to the tactical network. "USMC Scout Sniper School. Wait." He looked up, disbelief etching lines around his eyes. "You're Ghost Zero?" The team collectively stiffened. Ghost Zero was a legend in sniper circles, the unnamed shooter who had set the course record at Quantico 3 years ago. A record that had never been approached since, much less broken. Sarah didn't answer, checking the remaining ammunition instead. 1 round left. The medic looked up from tending to Daniels. "Ghost Zero is a myth, just a story instructors tell to motivate candidates." "Scores don't lie," Miller said, turning the tablet so others could see. "Perfect qualification run. Every target, every distance, every condition." He looked at Sarah with new eyes. "Then you disappeared from the sniper program, transferred to spotting." Sarah's hands stilled on the rifle. "My choice." The team leader's radio crackled. "Delta Team, be advised. Tango's closing on your position from the south. Estimated 12 to 15 combatants, heavily armed. ETA to contact approximately 8 minutes. Sarah shouldered Daniel's rifle and moved to the southern edge of their position, studying the terrain through the storm. "They'll use the ravine for cover. It's their only approach option in this visibility." The pendant at her neck seemed to burn against her skin. Her father's dog tag, carrying the same serial number as the one buried with him, the one she'd worn every day since his funeral. "Why spotting?" Miller asked, genuine confusion in his voice as he checked his weapon. "Why hide what you can do?" Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the southern approach. "After my father died, I needed to prove something. Breaking records was part of that." She adjusted her position, finding the best angle for the coming engagement. "But my scores threatened certain people, made them uncomfortable. So I was given a choice: accept a spotting role or face an administrative discharge for pattern of misconduct they would fabricate." The bitterness had long since faded from her voice, replaced by cold acceptance. "So I became a spotter. I focused on the math, the wind, the variables. I made others look good." A pause, heavy with unspoken truth. "Until today." The first shadows appeared in the storm's gray curtain, approaching fighters, using the weather as cover. 1 round left, Sarah noted clinically. 1 target that matters more than the others. She settled behind the scope, finding her center of stillness as chaos approached from all sides. Some silences speak louder than any confession. Gunfire erupted from the south as the Taliban fighters began their assault. Delta Team returned fire, creating a defensive perimeter around their wounded sniper. The odds were overwhelming. 15 fighters against 6 operators, 1 incapacitated, and a spotter turned reluctant shooter. "They're using the storm as cover," the team leader shouted over the firefight. "Conserve ammo. Wait for clean shots." Sarah remained motionless behind Daniel's rifle, ignoring the immediate threats. Her scope was trained on the ravine entrance, waiting. "Lieutenant, we need suppressing fire now," Miller called out, his previous skepticism forgotten in the desperation of combat. Sarah didn't move. "Negative. I'm waiting for their commander." "What commander?" the team leader demanded between bursts from his M4. "Tactical approach is too organized for a random patrol," she replied, her voice preternaturally calm amidst the chaos. "Someone's directing them. Someone who knows exactly where we are." Through her scope, Sarah watched the ravine entrance with absolute focus. The storm had begun to abate slightly, visibility extending to nearly 200 yards in brief windows. There, a figure hanging back while directing others forward. Different uniform, different posture, the unmistakable bearing of command. Target acquired, she murmured. The distance, 643 yards. In normal conditions, a manageable shot for a skilled marksman. But these weren't normal conditions. The storm had transformed into a localized weather system with its own internal logic. Swirling winds forming micro-tornadoes that could deflect a bullet off course by feet, not inches. 1 round left. 1 chance to break the assault's momentum. Sarah made her calculations, factoring in every variable her senses could detect. The shot would need to thread between 2 wind vortices while accounting for 3 different layers of crosswind. The bullet would need to fly a path that defied conventional ballistics. "Whatever you're waiting for," the team leader grunted as he reloaded. "Make it happen soon. We're about to be overrun." Sarah's world narrowed to her breathing, her trigger finger, and the distant figure partially obscured by swirling sand. The mathematics of the shot were beyond complex. They were very nearly impossible. But Sarah had long since moved past what others considered possible. She felt it then, the perfect moment approaching. A brief potential convergence where the storm's chaotic patterns would align for a fraction of a second, creating a tunnel of relative stability through which a bullet might fly true. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "The difference between good and great isn't talent, Sadie. It's the willingness to attempt what others call impossible." Sarah exhaled half a breath and held the remainder. Silence descended in her mind. The storm's howl faded away. The gunfire became distant, irrelevant. There was only the perfect union of shooter, weapon, and target. Would you risk everything on one moment of perfect clarity? The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the report barely registering in her hyper-focused state. Sarah tracked the vapor trail as it curved through the storm, watching as physics and faith traveled downrange at 2,700 feet per second. Time dilated. Each millisecond stretched into contemplative eternity. The bullet flew an impossible arc, riding the storm's currents like a leaf on water. It passed through one vortex, was pushed slightly left, then caught another current that nudged it right. The perfect balance of opposing forces, calculated to the finest degree. 643 yards away, the enemy commander's head snapped back. His body crumpled. "Target down," Sarah announced, already transitioning to her sidearm as she abandoned the now empty rifle. The effect on the battlefield was immediate. The attacking force hesitated, their coordinated effort dissolving into confusion. Some fighters began to retreat, while others pressed forward with increased desperation. "Push the advantage," the team leader ordered. "Concentrated fire on the center group." Delta Team surged forward, seizing the momentum shift. Sarah moved to Daniel's side, providing close protection while the medic worked. "Status?" she asked. "Multiple fragments, both eyes," the medic replied grimly. "He needs evacuation ASAP." The radio crackled. "Delta Team, this is Dustoff 3-7. Storm's breaking on the eastern approach. We have a narrow window for extraction. ETA your position 7 minutes. 7 minutes. They needed to hold. Sarah checked her sidearm. A standard issue M9 Beretta. 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Not a precision weapon, but effective at close range. The team leader slid into cover beside her. "That shot you just made, that's going in the books." His eyes reflected a new respect, tinged with something like regret. "If I'd known who you really were." "It doesn't matter now," Sarah cut him off. "We focus on extraction." A fresh wave of Taliban fighters emerged from the ravine, more cautious but equally determined. The team's ammunition was running dangerously low after the prolonged engagement. Miller took a hit, cursing as he dropped behind cover, clutching his shoulder. "They're flanking east. We're about to be surrounded." Sarah assessed the tactical situation with cold clarity. Their position was becoming untenable. The helicopter would be arriving blind, vulnerable during the crucial moments of touchdown. A decision crystallized in her mind. "Sir, I need to establish a counter-sniper position on the eastern ridge," she said to the team leader. "I can provide cover for the extraction using Daniel's spotter scope and my sidearm." The team leader stared at her. "That's a suicide mission, Lieutenant. You'd be completely exposed." "The alternative is we all die here," she replied simply. "Someone needs to keep their heads down while the helicopter lands." Understanding passed between them. A weight of command decisions and their consequences. He nodded once. God be with you, Ghost Zero. Sarah gathered Daniel's spotting equipment and her sidearm. No time for goodbyes or dramatic speeches. Only purpose and action. As she prepared to break cover, Daniels reached out blindly, somehow sensing her presence despite his bandaged eyes. "Reeves," he said, voice raw with pain and something deeper. "I always knew." Sarah paused. "Knew what?" "That you were better than me, than all of us." A pained smile crossed his bloodied face. "Give him hell, shooter." Sarah squeezed his hand once, then was gone, darting between cover positions toward the eastern ridge, alone against the storm and the enemy, armed with little more than absolute conviction and mathematical certainty. The helicopter's distant thrum vibrated through the thinning storm. 7 minutes to write a final chapter. Some moments demand everything we are. The eastern ridge offered minimal cover, just enough to break her silhouette against the sky. Sarah positioned herself behind a jagged rock formation, setting up the spotting scope on its tripod. Not as a spotter this time, but to extend her own lethal reach. Below, Delta Team had consolidated into a tight defensive perimeter around Daniels. The helicopter's approach was audible now, growing louder as it navigated through the storm's remnants. Through the spotting scope, Sarah counted 12 fighters regrouping for a final push. Their attention focused on Delta Team, not on the lone figure on the ridge. Not yet. She steadied her breathing, centering herself in the eye of her own private storm. The pendant pressed against her chest, her father's dog tag, carrying his legacy. The fighters began their advance, using the terrain for cover. Sarah tracked the lead fighter through the scope, calculating range, wind, and drop. Her sidearm wasn't designed for this. An M9 Beretta had an effective range of 50 yards. She was shooting at 120. Mathematics and faith, the two constants in her life. She squeezed the trigger. The lead fighter dropped. The others scattered, frantically searching for this new threat. One spotted her, shouted. Weapons turned toward the ridge. Sarah fired again and again, each shot a testament to impossible precision. The M9 becoming an extension of her will rather than a limitation. Bullets impacted around her position, chipping away at her meager cover. One grazed her arm, leaving a burning trail across her flesh. She ignored it, adjusting her position and continuing to fire. The helicopter appeared through the thinning storm, banking toward the landing zone where Delta Team waited. Its vulnerability during touchdown was absolute, a stationary target against fighters with RPGs. Sarah spotted a fighter raising the distinctive tube of a rocket launcher. Range, 165 yards, far beyond the effective range of her sidearm. Wind gusting to 15 mph from the east, an impossible shot. She had made a career of impossible shots. The world slowed. Her consciousness expanded to encompass every variable, every calculation. The ballistic arc, the wind's effect, the precise compensation needed. Sarah exhaled completely, finding that perfect stillness within chaos. Her finger squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew, defying conventional ballistics, riding the wind currents she had calculated with inhuman precision. 165 yards away, the RPG fighter jerked backwards. The rocket launcher discharged harmlessly into the ground. The helicopter touched down. Delta Team loaded Daniels and Miller aboard. Enemy fire concentrated on Sarah's position, the rock around her disintegrating under the barrage. A bullet found her leg. Another grazed her side. Below, the team leader gestured frantically for her to descend. The helicopter couldn't wait. Sarah fired her remaining rounds, each one finding its mark despite her deteriorating position and mounting injuries. Mathematics and fury, precision born from pain. Her magazine emptied, she secured the spotting scope and began the treacherous descent, half sliding, half falling down the rocky slope as bullets pursued her. The helicopter's rotors churned dust and smoke, creating a final barrier of concealment. Sarah sprinted the last 30 yards, each step leaving a bloody footprint on the Afghan soil. Hands reached out, pulling her aboard as the helicopter lifted. The door gunner laid down, suppressing fire, keeping the fighters at bay. As they gained altitude, breaking through the last remnants of the storm into clear sky above, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the wounds, the exhaustion, the weight of what she had accomplished. "Never seen anything like it," the team leader shouted over the rotor noise, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. 16 confirmed kills, with a handgun, at distance. Sarah didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the steel pendant in her blood-stained hand. Her father's dog tag catching the sunlight breaking through the clouds. The impossible mathematics of survival. The precise calculations of legacy. Ghost Zero was no longer a myth whispered about in training courses. Ghost Zero had a name now. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves leaned her head back against the helicopter's vibrating frame, eyes closing as the adrenaline began to fade. Not just a spotter anymore. The silence within her was complete, perfect, eternal. Some legends are born in fire, others in silence. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood at attention in a briefing room at Camp Leatherneck, her dress uniform immaculate despite the sling supporting her wounded arm. Before her, a panel of senior officers reviewed the after-action reports from Operation Kingfisher. Colonel Harrison, the base commander, looked up from the file. "Lieutenant Reeves, this report contains accounts that frankly strain credulity." Behind her, the members of Delta Team had assembled in silent support. Daniels was there too, his eyes still bandaged, guided by Miller, whose previous contempt had transformed into something approaching reverence. "The report is accurate, sir," the team leader stated. "Every word." Colonel Harrison leaned forward. 16 confirmed enemy KIA. 11 with a sidearm at ranges exceeding 100 yards. During a sandstorm, his eyebrows rose. And before that, a 1,742-yard confirmed kill on a high-value target through the same storm. With a single shot. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "You realize these feats rewrite what we consider possible in combat marksmanship. The mathematics were sound, sir. The physics consistent." A ghost of a smile touched the colonel's weathered face. "Indeed." He closed the file. "Which brings us to the matter at hand. Your reassignment." Sarah's posture remained rigid, prepared for whatever came next. Another support role, perhaps. Another position where her true capabilities would remain hidden. "Effective immediately, you are being reassigned to Quantico," Colonel Harrison continued. "Scout Sniper School." Sarah's composure cracked, just slightly. "Sir, as chief instructor." The colonel stood. "It seems we've been wasting one of our finest assets in a support role, Lieutenant. That ends today." He extended a hand, offering her a set of orders. "Your call sign has been officially updated in the system as well." Sarah accepted the papers, glancing down at the designation that would follow her name on all future operations. Call sign, Ghost Zero. Miller stepped forward, surprising everyone. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" The colonel nodded. "I was wrong about Lieutenant Reeves," Miller said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We all were. She wasn't just the best spotter I've ever seen. She's the finest shooter in the Corps." The room fell silent. Acknowledgement, respect, atonement. Daniel's voice broke the silence, quiet but clear despite his injuries. "The bullet doesn't care who pulls the trigger. It only cares about physics." A smile touched his lips. "She taught me that." Sarah stood a little straighter, the weight of recognition settling on shoulders accustomed to bearing invisible burdens. Colonel Harrison addressed the entire room. "The landscape of warfare is changing. Old prejudices and limitations have no place in today's Corps." His eyes found Sarah's. "Ghost Zero has shown us that excellence knows no gender. Respect isn't given with rank or tradition. It's earned through merit." As the briefing concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by the men of Delta Team, no longer outsiders and the woman, but comrades forged in combat's crucible. The team leader pressed something into her palm, a sniper's logbook bound in weathered leather. "Start your official count," he said simply. Sarah nodded once, fingers closing around the book. Her father's voice echoed in her mind one final time. "The best revenge against those who underestimate you isn't anger, Sadie. It's excellence." Outside, beyond the base perimeter, Afghanistan's endless sky stretched toward infinity. A canvas of ballistic trajectories and mathematical certainties. A place where physics and faith intersected in perfect, deadly harmony. Ghost Zero would write her legend there, one impossible shot at a time. What limits will you shatter when the world finally sees you clearly?